Simple. I am Thaddeus Campbell, as always, your host. Proud to be joined today by one of, you can tell we're laughing already. We haven't even started the podcast yet. Somebody that I consider a close friend, and somebody that whenever we get together, this is always the frame of mind that we find ourselves in. So excited to spend a half hour talking self-storage with Daniel Whitney, the owner, the president, the founder of Whitney Development. Daniel, thanks so much for taking some time and coming and joining me tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me, bud. It's always a good time talking to you. What are we
I
getting
love
into?
it and excited. I always start this because self-storage is such a niche thing. It's such a, and I happen to find myself into this asset completely by accident. So I'm always interested to find out how, especially young guys like you, and I am insanely jealous of anyone younger than 45 that already found their way into self-storage. And you're younger than that markedly. Tell me a little bit about your journey in real estate. How did you get into real estate? How did you know you wanted to be in real estate? And how did you end up finding yourself in self storage?
Well, I mean, it all starts off when I was a wee little lass. No, I mean, I was, I was always in construction. I came up doing the residential construction thing, framing houses. I was a finished carpenter by trade. I had a small business when I was younger, doing some construction stuff. Um, and just being a young guy when I was in my early 20s in business, it was just tough. Then I ended up working in some finance, going back to construction, and then I got a call from a guy saying, "Hey, you know, I got a company who's looking for a superintendent to do commercial projects. Is this something that interests you?" I was like, "Yeah, something like I got to wind this thing down. Like, being a young contractor at the time was not the thing I wanted to do anymore. We were making money, but like, you know, working in residential homes, I mean, you're dealing with homeowners. People don't pay their bills. It just is what it is." So I got a job as a superintendent. My first project I showed up was in Newark, New Jersey on Gould Avenue. It was a 5-story, 0 lot line project. And I took it over essentially right from the slab. They had a separate superintendent on it. I took it over from there. I traveled around the country doing storage all over the place, and I've been in it ever since. I mean, like, Thaddeus, you and I have said this plenty of times. Everyone ends up in self storage by accident. At least guys like us, like guys who've been in it for a while. None of us grew up like, hey, like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go build self storage. A lot of us ended up there just because it's where we landed. The nice thing I like to see now is you see these younger guys seeing it as such a cool asset class to get into. But yeah, then I've worked my way up from project manager. Then I was a director of development on the construction side. I worked my way through the construction ranks. Then Whitney Development came out of the fact that, my old boss, we were always building storage projects. The clients would come to us and say, "Hey, how do I make this cheaper?" I would go help them out. My boss would get mad at me because I was cutting his overhead and profit down. And I said, "Hey, something the right thing to do is help people save money." So here I am today.
When did you decide to leave? And this is always a tough one. It's an interesting question. I'm excited to kind of dig into the psychology of it. So I'll narrow this question a little bit. What made you have that willingness to leave that job? Because listen, you weren't getting paid pennies as a superintendent on building self storage developments. What gave you the confidence to leave that and go say, "Hey, I'm going to start out on my own"?
Sure. So I mean, and yeah, so I mean, like when I was at my old job, my last title I had outside of working for myself was director of development. I worked my way up to project manager, then I was director, and then I was kind of, always on that high. I kind of worked my way up to that higher level quick, just because, I understand how these things go together. We were able to put these things together well, and I think one of the main reasons is just that on the general contractor side, everything is based on your percentage fee, how much you can mark up those lines, how much you can do that stuff. And that's not the game I like to play. I like transparent pricing. I want to know what things actually cost. I want things designed properly. I mean, so many times I'll get plans from an architect and I would just start tearing my hair out, just being like, why are we putting this together this way? Um, there was one project that I did over here in New Jersey. I'm not going to mention the company, but it was put together so asinine that I was like, what the fuck are you guys doing here, bro? Like, why are you putting this together this way? And then like you go and you just redesign it and you'd be like, hey, we cut $30 a square foot out of this thing. And back then, I mean, we were building things in the high 50s, low 60s. I don't know if you remember those times. I mean, like you hear low
I
60s
missed
now,
that
people are
high
like, what
switch.
up?
Got in
You
about
know?
65, 70.
Yeah, no, that was you guys. I was able to get that down. But I mean, like, but here's the thing though, is that, you know, my boss would tell me like, hey, don't, like you're cutting into the overhead and profit. Granted, we're getting a ton of work out of it, right? Because the clients really appreciated that stuff. But I realized that our niche was really there. Plus, I was really into the pre-construction side. I really liked the entitlements. We got really good at that when I was there. So, I decided, hey, look, I want to go start doing this for people. I want to start helping more developers out and be able to say, hey, guys, like, you don't have to build for so many dollars. You can do it for so much cheaper. And by the way, your entitlements don't have to be so hard. You hear so many of these guys saying, oh, it took me 2 years to get stuff done. And it's like, even in New Jersey, we're getting stuff done in 12 months maximum, right? And that's with all kinds of use variances and all kinds of things going on. That's hey, you tell me let's go. You just put a PSA, you just signed your PSA to let's go break ground. Um,
I love that, and it's a question that I wanted to ask you anyway. So we'll go down that road.
sure.
I came from a group that was going after use approved land for self storage.
Hmm.
And one of the very first conversations I ever had with you, you said, hey, if you guys find something in New Jersey and it's not approved for storage, I'm your guy. Let me help you out. I can get a zone change very quickly done. And I was blown away because I had only ever heard, and mind you, when I first met you, I was maybe 8 months into the storage game. I had come from residential real estate. I had only ever heard horror stories about zoning changes. And in fact, the company I was with at the time, they just didn't want to take on the headache of a variance, right? They didn't want to go get a full zone. They might go through a cup approval or a sub approval, a conditional use or a special use permit, didn't want to deal with a full variance. Why is it that you've been able to A, embrace that, and then B, be so successful at getting them done quickly?
Well, I think one of the main reasons we've become able to embrace that is because there is no good land anymore. Everything needs a variance. I mean, even on a by right self storage project, you're going for a parking waiver 9 times out of 10, right? I
Yeah.
mean, do I need one spot per 1,000 square feet? No, I don't need 120 parking spaces. If all 8 of my parking spaces are filled, it's the busiest day that site's ever going to see.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's just that it's all about the story you tell, and you have to be willing to go in and have a little bit of an argument. But the argument can't be like, hey, it's us against the city. It needs to be like you working with the city, right? Like, hey, we're looking at this piece of land. Let's look at what the city wants. Let's look at the things this site is. It could be a funeral home. There's already one over here. It could be a parking deck. Do you really need a parking deck? It could be this. It could be that. You have to look at those uses, figure out those fiscal impacts, and then say, hey, the fiscal impact of self storage is really quite benign and actually really good for the town itself because you almost have no sewer use. You've got no impact on school systems. Your DPW dollars are slim to none, if anything. Your police, EMS, and fire. What's the real impact? We have CCTV. We
Once a
kind of
century.
govern. Yeah, we govern ourselves, but they're high ratables. So it's like you think you would tell that. I mean, you know how that goes. You think you would tell it to a city, and they'd just be like, "Oh yeah, that's great." You have to figure out what the city's. You have to figure out what they're accustomed to, what they want. I mean, a lot of guys try to go in and bully their way through things. Like we work with these guys, but a lot of times when, like for example, like I know you had sent me something to look at recently, right? One of the first things we did was call the city. Let's find out who we know. We've also got a ton of political connections. We've got, political lobbyists that we work with. We've got all those guys. So we know that, hey, look, maybe the mayor over here really likes this because of this, but he's got to talk to this guy to go to this guy and then do this. But then guess what? That's how stuff gets done quick. You've got to do that with all of your entitlements. You've got to do that with your DOT. You've got to do that with your DEP. You've got to do that with all these things. It just is what it is. But the reality of it is all of us have to start getting comfortable with use variances because it is what it is at this point. Because everyone wants to be on that commercial corridor. Every town, I mean, 10 years ago, people just started redoing their ordinances 10 years ago. You
Right.
still see those antiquated ordinances where it's like, oh, a storage building can only be 15 foot in height and 6,000 square feet in max size. They're worried about drive up buildings is what they're worried about. And they don't, and that's not what a lot of people are building anymore. We're building the Class A climate control multi-story. Now, granted, there's still markets where you want to see this beautiful Class A drive up, which I still think is a great product. But I mean, you know, you want them on those retail corridors. You don't want to be back in an industrial park. And self storage was always seen as an industrial use, when in reality, it's not industrial use. We're the retail sale of storage.
100%.
And but you have to find the way to convince those guys. So we spend a lot of time. You have you buy your property, you have your zoning hearing, and 4 months from them, you got to get your documents together, you got to get your renderings together. I mean, the amount of time we spend just preparing for that one meeting. And I mean, I also do all the testimony for us, just because you have to get good at testimony. You have to get at talking to these guys. You just have to.
I want to go down a road here, and obviously, I know a little bit about your background, and you were a very high level rugby guy. I'm
Yes.
interested to know how much you feel that athletic side of your life played a role in this confidence you have in doing something that so many people are like, I'm never doing that, right? And here you are, and you're like, nah, this is what we got to do. I'm going to go do it.
I mean, I think it all kind of comes with the gung ho attitude. Um, you know, it's not even really from rugby. When I was a kid and I was a wrestler, your coach would tell you, "Hey, it's mental toughness, man. You're going 3 hours without water, and all you're doing is conditioning. Like, you kind of get used to the pain. I mean, the reality of it is, real estate development can get painful. It gets really frustrating. And I'd be lying to you if I tell you I don't get frustrated, right? We all do. It's just the reality of the business. The amount of times I motherfuck somebody is just incredible. Like I just you hang up the phone from the city, you just sit there, like your face turns red. It just is what it is. But you have to figure out how to get around those different things. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just, we're used to working hard. We always work I always, I'm in the office early, we leave late. I mean, you have to do those things to kind of be successful in this business, because there's also so many guys getting into storage now that
You aren't lying.
I
I was
know. And
just
it's
out
just
at
like,
ISS, and it was unbelievable how many people were at this trade show, especially given what we kind of know about what's been going on with the economy. And listen, self storage is by no means in a horrible spot, but relative to a couple of years ago, man, it's definitely a little different. And ISS was overrun with people.
well, I feel like during COVID, you saw a huge influx of people into these shows, because people saw these rental rates go up, and everyone was kind of like, "Oh yeah, like this is staying." It's like, guys, we were still underwriting 20% less. Like, we were still saying, like, "Hey guys, these rates are going to come back down. This is temporary." Um, but then you saw it dwindle down a little bit in Maryland. I did not go to ISS as much as I wish I had, but unfortunately, I had projects. I had hearings that week, but
It'll
it's
work every once in a while.
yeah. Um, it's honestly, I forgot the question. I don't even remember where we're going with that.
I didn't even ask you a question. I was just
I don't
giving you
even know why the
space.
fuck. What
I got a
conversation?
couple things I want to go down the road of. First of all, you brought up wrestling. So me as a former MMA instructor, and you're a Jersey Shore guy, and wrestling is like, man, you guys are absolutely nuts. When I was fully teaching MMA, I got a chance to go out and interview a guy who was a training partner of Frankie Edgar at the time. I'm sure you know who Frankie Edgar is as a guy from the
Mhm.
Jersey Shore. For those of you who are not familiar with MMA at all, Frankie Edgar was a UFC champion, really amazing fighter, but a wrestler, and a guy from the Jersey Shore. I went out to interview this kid, and Frankie Edgar was running a 2 hour wrestling practice, and it was like in March. It was cold. It wasn't very nice out. They had the gym heated to 115 degrees.
Hell yeah.
We spent 2 hours wrestling at 115 degrees. It was the most miserable experience of my life. So you mentioned that, and I just thought it was interesting. Like, you have that mentality of that Jersey wrestling. Jersey's ridiculous. For those of you who don't know, New Jersey produces more Division I scholarship athletes than any state in the country per capita, and it's kind of ingrained in the lifeblood. Like, you kind of got to be a fighter in this state.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, and I mean the fact that, and I do attribute the fact that being from New Jersey, coming up in New Jersey land use, we've just gotten good at it everywhere else. Because you go to these other states, you hear what they're doing, you're like, all right, cool, let's run. Like, people are like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude, we got this, no problem." I mean, like, I actually this is a funny story, just like on that whole Jersey thing. Like, I did a hearing in Pennsylvania once, and there's the stenographer there sometimes. They're sitting there typing away, and they're asking me all, and it was a very funny hearing because they did almost like a cross examination where like you had your attorney, they had their attorney, and then they kind of sat there and asked you questions. Then you were like kind of trying to explain, but then like it's a testimony, so you also just kind of want to go with it. So at one point, the stenographer actually yelled at me like, "Hey, like you need to slow down," and I was kind of like, "Yo, you need to speed up." Because like I am going slow, man. Like we can make this a lot faster. But yeah, no,
Uh,
you're absolutely right. I mean, coming up in New Jersey, it's just it's a different environment. I mean, that's one thing I've learned definitely traveling around the country building storage. And just like, at one point I had an apartment in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I was living in Chicago. I was doing all these things. And, you know, you learn that like it's funny, you go into these site meetings and you just start speaking, and a lot of people you kind of get like, yo, shit. Like this guy, like, I'm not gonna talk back to this dude real quick. And it's just like then you like leave the meeting, you're like, yeah, I'm just some like goofball from New Jersey. Like I just happen to be from there.
it's funny when you travel out. Like I'm a Northeasterner. I grew up in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts and New Jersey, the two most densely populated states in the country, by the way. Um, just it's weird when you leave, like you don't realize the advantage you have growing up out here until you go out into the Midwest or into other parts of the country, and life just moves at a very different pace. And because we're raised in a way where it's like you're moving constantly just to keep up, you're ahead of the game a little bit in that.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely 100%. I mean, I grew up, I mean, so I didn't grow up in Jersey Shore. I actually grew up in North Jersey, but I grew up 30 minutes outside of New York City. So you had that mix of New Jersey plus New York City going on.
Oh,
Yeah,
insanity.
yeah, horrible people, all of us. But I mean, like, absolutely all of us, like, yeah. But I mean, it definitely helps you as you go through to other places. But it's also one of those things too that can hurt you in other places. So that's where
Yeah,
you need to.
no doubt.
That's where, like, for example, I'm going out to a meeting in Texas next week, and I'll make sure on Monday I got to fly out for a pre-app meeting, and I'm going to make sure that I speak very slowly. I'm going to cut it down with the attitude a little bit. There's going to be no fucking swearing. There's going to be no swearing, just a little bit. You still have to go and enforce the hand.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
but you have to do those things. So you have to take advantage of where you're from. You have to take advantage of the experience you've had, because like, you can't go into something and just say, okay, I'm going to be this whole new person. And I feel like that's what a lot of people do, is they kind of they get the button down shirt on, they kind of turn into this different person. With Thaddeus, you know me, man, in a professional setting, I'll sit there and talk to you the same way that I'm going to talk to you at the bar later that night.
That's
Like,
why I
it's
was
just,
so excited to have you on the podcast, man. Like we have a conversation on a trade show floor, and the conversation or a conversation on the phone about a specific project, a Zoom call about a specific project, or we're sitting down at dinner at a trade show where it's out to socialize. You are the same guy in every one of those instances, which is why I knew that bringing you on the podcast. And listen, that's the whole point of the podcast. The whole point of the podcast is not to have this staid conversation that's stodgy and no, we want to hear the real life. Like we want to hear what is this really
yeah,
like. So
this
I
is actually
appreciate
what's
you
going.
about
Yeah,
that.
this is what's actually going on. This is that. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you don't want to. I don't. One thing I've found in life, man, is I don't. Yeah, sure. If I have to go into like a zoning board hearing, I'm not going to sit there and you know
Yeah,
do what
there's a
I do.
level of
There's a
professionalism.
level of professionalism, but outside of that, man, like, you want to work with people that you want to work with. You also you want to be able to be yourself, because when you can't, man, like, it's also hard to get things done. Like, part of the reason I think that we do get things done is because we're very high energy. We
100%.
we were able to get a
Appreciate that,
lot done
buddy.
very. We're allowed to get a lot done very quickly, right? And like, you send me a property a day later, you're getting all kinds of information that
I got a
you're,
massive amount. It was
you're like,
crazy.
what's coming? But that's because we're getting so high energy about it. Because these are the things that excite us. It's amazing to think that you and me were sitting here like all excited about self storage. If you asked me about this 20 years ago, I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about, man?
uh,
Um,
by the way, Shimon Cantor, I hate you. I'm just going to throw that out there in the podcast. I hope Shimon watches this episode
Wait,
because
hold on a second. Even
I
better.
had this amazing
Did you
flight.
see Shimon's LinkedIn post? He looks like he's selling real estate.
I know. Yeah,
Um,
his picture from going. Are you going to Nisa next week? By the way.
The hell's that? I don't know what the fuck that is.
New England Self Storage Association,
Oh,
Foxwoods.
actually, I thought about it. It's up on my wall. I thought about what days are those?
Anyway, it's Wednesday and Thursday. If you're up there, we'll say
Yeah,
hi. We'll break some bread.
yeah,
I
maybe.
got a
I
couple
actually,
things I want to touch on with you, and we're running out of time. I always honor the 30 minutes, not only for you and your time, but also for the people listening. I want to make sure this is digestible. The one thing
I
I
just
wanted to ask you
that's what I'm trying.
specifically about is you put some serious money into taking your team out to trade shows. Like,
Yes.
you don't go to all of them, but you definitely show up when you do. You bring a crew with you. Why is that important to you, and what has that done for your business?
Well, it's first of all, like it's when you get the booth, like if you look at the cost of just doing these things, right? The booth, once you buy the booth, I like having the booth. It gives us a place to hang out. It gives us a place to have meetings. I mean, now times that is, you go to the storage, you go to the storage show, you go to have a meeting. It's like, oh, meet me in the SSA cafe. It's like, well, there's 400 fucking tables in here. Which one are you at? Like, raise your hand. And five guys are raising their hand because they're doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So it gave us a place to have those meetings, and candidly, it comes with the tickets. But also, then we buy the extras because I think it's so important to get out there and talk to everybody because there's always something you can learn from people, right? Like the guys that work for me are project managers or underwriters or assistant PMs. I mean, like, getting out there, putting yourself in front of the metal building guys, like, hey, guys, you guys are the ones that are setting us prices constantly. What's going on? Or, hey, we got to negotiate this. Hey, let's do this in person. Let's go talk about these things. Or there's that different new technology that came out. Like, all right, like I was just talking about it today. Actually, I was playing with the one kiosk at the trade show. So we're gonna put that out on a project in South Carolina. Um, I think it's so important to just continue the education on all that stuff, but it's also so important to get that social aspect of the business, right? Because you could sit there, crawl into a hole, and just be like, no, like this is what we're doing. We don't need to go to trade shows because we don't need to network. It's like, no, you like, even if you have nothing to sell somebody, go network with everybody because there's going to be a service that maybe you need. There's going to be a product you didn't know about. There's going to be, or hey, maybe you just make a friend, right? Like the amount of guys that I hang out with at the trade shows, and yeah, right. Like the amount of guys I hang out with at the trade shows, that like who knows? Maybe I'll do business with them one day. Maybe I won't. I don't care. I love going to see them a couple times a year, hanging out, having a beer at the bar, talking shit in this trade show floor. Like that's what it's there for. And it's so good to just get the industry together because you also realize I think it's really important, especially for newer people getting in, that it's such a small industry. It's such a small industry, so you want to make sure you're careful about how you handle yourself sometimes, right?
I
I
love
think it's
that. Love
I think
that point.
I think it's good for people to understand that this isn't like, when I was on the construction side, my old boss did a ton of retail too. So I used to go to the ICSC shows.
Yeah.
And you'd go there and be 20, 30,000 people, whatever the hell it was, at the Javits Center and then at the Vegas convention. You can even walk the whole damn thing in the 3 days.
Right.
And it's like, and it's like all you want, you're nothing in those places. But one thing people in storage I think is nice is that it's so easy to know everybody, right? Like knowing everyone, obviously there's like 2,500 people. You're not going to know every single person's name, but as people walk down the aisle, you start to recognize his faces a lot. You get the acquaintance, then you go introduce yourself. You say hello. Maybe it's someone you can do business with. Maybe it's someone that's just fun to meet. One thing I've also noticed about storage is there's a lot of really cool people in it.
100%.
And I mean, like, I've done the NAOP shows, I've done the ICSC shows, I've done all these things. Storage is by far the most fun as far as a trade show. I mean, it's just a grouping of fucking animals, the whole place, that is. It's just the whole thing.
I love that you brought that up because it's a theme that comes up really constantly on this podcast, which is just how amazing the camaraderie is within the space, unlike any other thing I've ever been involved with inside real estate or outside real estate. It's pretty phenomenal the way that animals, like people that are working, man, they're not afraid of doing crazy things,
Yeah.
but willing to reach out and help somebody, no problem. If they see somebody who's working their butt off, they're willing to give a hand, which is really cool.
I mean, that's one of the best things too, is the fact that it's a small enough industry so you can make these relationships. So like, when people have a problem, like there are people that call me all the time that maybe are people, yeah, they're not clients of Whitney Development, but sure, they call me, hey Dan, like I'm working on this, or it's a contractor that I talked to saying, hey Dan, this client brought this up to me. What do you think of this idea? And it's like, yeah, I'll sit there and bullshit with you all day. Why not? Because something like eventually we're going to be able to help each other out.
100%.
You're going to be able to help each other out. And that's the biggest thing with the trade shows. Get out there, meet everybody, get the network grown. Go
It's
talk
so
to.
funny because,
I don't care if I don't care if you're a metal building guy. Go meet brokers, right?
yep.
Like you two will probably never really do business together. Maybe you will one day. You know, like even
That
the
you
insurance
read
guys.
so much about abundance mindset, about, believing that there's enough for everybody, and you see it so infrequently in the real world. But for whatever reason, in self-storage, man, there really is that abundance mindset where everyone just believes like there's enough for everyone. I don't have to be, I don't have to compete with everyone to make a living in this space.
Yeah, you don't have to. You don't have to. I mean, like, that's also why I like what I do because no one really does what we do in the space, right? I mean, people could say they're using their contractors for it, but you and I have had that conversation.
Yeah,
We're not going
no.
to go. So I'm not going to sit here and plug. That's not my thing. But I mean,
So
like,
I want you to plug because we're going to wrap up, and the whole point of this is to get information out. So
I'm here to talk to you, bro. I'm just here hanging out. So
I
like,
love
I'm
it,
having
and
fun.
you're here to talk to me. I'm glad. Now I'm here.
Yeah.
What I want is I want you to tell me who is someone that benefits from Whitney development.
Um, here's the thing: is the answer really is everybody. But I'm going to go with. I mean, because here's the thing, right? Like, so you're an architect, right? We have work going on with developers. We have work going on over here. Like, you know, we need architects, we need civil engineers, we need these guys. Like a lot of times, we're everyone's best business development guy because I have a client comes to me says, "Hey, I've got these three projects. All right, cool. Let's get some bids for the architecture. Let's get them all together." And cool. Now all of a sudden, we're working together because I got that. Same thing for civil engineers, insurance guys we deal with all the time, brokers we deal with. But I mean, the main guys are really the developers because the benefits that I've found of using us is just, you know, they're saving so much money on their projects that they're able to go do more projects. But the other thing is they're creating bandwidth for themselves, not only in the dollars, because dollars are really measurable, but so is time,
Yeah,
right? Like, and there's so many project managers out there in the world that are good people. Maybe they know construction, but they have no business being anywhere near an entitlement. And there's also guys, also just focus on what you're good at. Like if you've got the ability to go out and raise capital, right? You've got this ability to go out and raise capital. Then like, you're mainly a finance guy, right? You're focusing on the numbers, this, that, the other thing. We're able to talk to you about that stuff too. We have the underwriting in house. But I mean, like, that's your expertise. Why would you not go focus on your expertise and do something that
100%.
maybe you're less uncomfortable with, which is
Yeah,
us.
last thing you want to be spending your time with. If you're able to make $1 million phone calls, you don't want to be calling the Fort Myers, Florida zoning department to try and see if
No,
you can get a parking variance.
especially if that's not your forte.
Right.
Like you
100%.
see a lot of, and that's one thing I've found in the industry. You see a lot of guys just kind of, just kind of moving along very slowly. You hear about these projects take 2 years, 3 years to get entitlement. You're like, what the hell took you so damn long? And then to only find out, like, yeah, like these guys, this guy's skill is raising capital. This guy's skill is underwriting. This guy's skill is acquisitions.
Love
Okay,
it.
great. So if that's the case, why not bring in the team that can help you out? Not only save the dollars, but save all that time on the backside because now you're creating more time for yourself. You're creating more equity for yourself. I mean, it's
One of the
really,
things I love about these projects, because right now, like, average 100,000 square foot facility, we're looking at what, $12 million on the low end, all in cost.
nowhere
There's
close.
enough. The point is, there's enough to go around. You don't have to you can't do all of it yourself, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense to parcel off a little bit of it and let somebody else help out.
And here's the thing, right? So like a lot of guys will say, okay, I got my architect, my engineer. These guys are going to go draw this thing and do whatever, right? Like that's the wrong way to look at it because you need to monitor your people. You need to be able to say like keep them accountable. Say, hey, this is why this is going wrong. These are the things within this building that I mean, like just recently we did a project, we cut like $1.5 million out of it in like 3 weeks. And
Paid
it's
for
like
your fee 3 times over, 4 or 5 times
10,
over.
20 times over. I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean it was a huge savings for those guys, and we were happy to do it because it's what we do every
And the
day.
reality is the architect doesn't have a different paycheck depending on how inexpensively they brought the project in.
Well, a lot of times they're going to charge you more because now they got to go back and make all these stupid revisions. And if you
Right.
don't watch these guys, I mean, your projects become change order city. They do all this stuff happens. I mean, our projects don't have those issues. Like
So if somebody wants to get a hold of Daniel Whitney and have a conversation with you about what it looks like to work with you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
messenger pigeon, smoke signals, free beers at the bar.
Go to the local
No, I mean,
bar.
look, I mean, it's you can check us out at whitneydevelopment.com. My cell phone number is right on there. Feel free to check us out. My email is dan at
They'll be your
whitneydevelopment.
cell phone number will be crawling across the bottom of this screen with your email address. So
I'd
we'll put
appreciate that. Yeah, I
we'll
mean,
put the crawl on there and make it easy for people to get a hold of you. Since you offered it, I'll make it easy for people to get a hold of you, man. Hey,
yeah,
we actually went over the 30 minutes, which doesn't surprise me. I'm gonna have you back on again sometime in the near future because I got 10 more questions I didn't even get a chance to ask you. Man, I can't thank you enough for taking a little time out of your day to come and hang out and smile with me, man.
bro, Thaddeus, always good seeing you, brother. Thank you for having me on, man. I really, really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you.
Appreciate you, Daniel. Talk soon.
Cheers.